Alright, well, welcome to another episode of Inspired Content during the week of reading short stories. Doing 5 days of 2 short stories each, one from each of these books. And today's story from Isaac's Universe, Volume 1, The Diplomacy Guild, has been The Burning Sky by Poul Anderson. And following that off with Proving the Rule by Holy Phillips from A Book of Wizards. Alright, so I'll take a look at these stories and come back with ideas and inspirations I got from them. See you on the other side. Taking a look at The Burning Sky from Isaac's Universe, Volume 1, The Diplomacy Guild. The Burning Sky by Poul Anderson. I would say I kind of enjoyed this story. I give it a 5.3 out of a 5.6. It's got a good mix of human interaction, how people relate to one another. The characters are well developed enough that you get a sense of they have real personalities that you can analyze and look into. They're not just two-shade characters that fill a need in the story. But there's some ideas in there that are on my mind, so let's get started with those. Okay, a ship trapped on the edge of 2 colliding neutron stars catches a glimpse as they collide of a secret that allows them to learn how to open doorways into other realities. So the idea is kind of like the secret that lets us move not just from planet to planet or galaxy to galaxy, but universe to universe, is hidden in that moment where 2 objects crush into each other and punch a hole in space-time. Okay, speaking of punching holes in things, it occurs to me in a science fiction setting, we see things like artificial gravity on ships, and yes, it's meant to make the story relatable. But the thing you oftentimes see is like things like black holes are dangerous because they have such high, dangerous gravity. But all these ships have artificial gravity. So if you can manipulate gravity, why would the gravity of something like a black hole be a danger to you? Well, there might be reasons for it, but it also makes me wonder if a ship that can create gravity and negate gravity, so if they have anti-gravity technology, would it be possible to use anti-gravity to punch a hole in the gravity, or the singularity around a black hole? Would it pop like a bubble and just explode, or would it be like poking a hole in a bag full of water and watching the water just spew out in a stream right in the hole you poked? And it's like the idea of tapping into the raw, otherworldly, massive power concentrated to the center of a black hole, and just a simple little hole would be all you'd have to poke into that, if you could find a way to poke it. I gotta wonder if there's a way to use that in a story. Okay, there was a section in here where I thought for a very brief moment that they were trying to say, the author was trying to say that as they got into another section of space where they were surrounded by certain types of stars, that the radiation and the gravitational effects and the light and all those things might alter the mind in a given way. It would turn them more primitive or something to that effect. I had this sense that there was some danger to their ability to function and think straight. It turns out to be I misinterpreted a couple sentences, but it's it's an idea I think I may pursue at some point, where wandering into an unknown territory one encounters signaling that changes the way people think and feel and interact. And this was kind of brought on by the idea of, they're talking about two black holes, and this is spoilerish, but two black holes grazing one another. And so they weren't sure what would happen, and some of the characters thought, well, clearly nothing escapes a black hole once it crosses the event horizon, so when they start to cross their event horizons, they'll be stuck forever. And I got to thinking, like, if you really think about, like, water on a hot skillet, when two drops collide, they'll elongate, and some of them will break back apart, and some of them will spin back into each other. It's like, this is what my mind says should happen. But taking it a little bit further, what if they, the gravitational forces that are affecting it, two pieces hit and they elongate and stretch out into a strand that, with the gravity pulling in, crunches down into a two-dimensional plane that just sort of cuts through anything it goes through. It's not a three-dimensional mass, so it's just going to infinitely fine slices through whatever it passes through. And the idea of a research vessel that's watching this happen, thinking it's just going to crunch together into a bigger black hole, gets hit by the edge of this whip and just slices through the ship. And it's just laying there waiting for rescue. Okay, this one was an interesting idea for me, where I was thinking a combination of like black holes colliding head on, so that there's no grazing blow like talking in this, but hitting head on, and kind of the explosive impact of throwing off small, tiny, little, comparatively small black holes. And it combines in my head with the idea of quantum entanglement, so that you have these black holes connected to these other black holes, so what happens at one happens at the other. The implication in my mind says this is how you form wormholes, but because you're hitting in a collision, you might have a bigger one that stays in location, and that's your main entry gate, and the impact throws out all these other ones that are speeding through space. And it got me thinking of like doorways that move. You could literally jump in the central one, pop out the smaller ones as they move through other solar systems. And the thing about them being in motion is you can't stop them. You could pop out that gateway and explore, but you've got a limited amount of time, depending on how fast your space vehicle can travel, to get back in front of it and be pulled back in before it moves out of range and you're stuck wherever you are because you can't traverse the space in between again. If you had an alien race that was such a firm believer in sort of Darwinian principles, that the strongest should survive and the rest should be culled, they may very well try to set up some massive collision that would send shockwaves through the entirety of a galaxy, in the hopes that only the strongest would survive such a galactic calamity. And so they might try and set something like that up to happen, and they may be working towards it for millennia, just trying to coax by little motions of planets colliding into each other, forming a massive singularity. I actually kind of enjoyed the premise of this story. The beginning was a little hard for me to get into, and the ending didn't satisfy what I was hoping for. But the main bulk of the story, the concept and some of the way it was organized, really did work for me. So I'm giving it about a 7.4 out of a 7.9. Dreams inflicted by nightmares. Some nightmare creature catches you in your dreams and tries to inflict nightmares and terrors on you, only to find that for some reason the main character, in this case, is not even remotely afraid. They just can't be afraid of their dreams. And it's what makes this person different and what empowers them to be fearless in their dreams. What happens if you're interacting with some mystical force within a dream and you wake up, but you leave part of yourself in the dream, so that even as you're walking through the waking world, there's a part of you that has a foothold still in the realm of dreams. So you can see the daydreams and the lingering tales of dreams that people had as they walked past, and the marks that dreams leave on the territory around them, the buildings and the street, and the fact that dreams and nightmares wander the street between us at night anyway. Just the implication of a person sort of here but there also, and what that imparts to them. The idea of a well where when people drink from the water they go mad, and the people who are trying to cover that up, and yet the implication that it's a magical effect that's happening to people, and the people who are covering it up might use it intentionally on others, discredit them or get rid of them or whatever. But the possibility of a person who is mad, is genuinely crazy, but manages to pass themselves off as not, being caught and fed from the well in an attempt to discredit and remove their influence from the field. Only when you're already mad and you're exposed to waters from the well, it twists the madness into a sort of wisdom of a wisdom beyond mortal minds, something near godly or sage-like or wizardly in a way. One of the characters is riding in a car and feeling like he's a boy in imaginary armor with a cardboard sword facing dragons. And I just had this image of somebody who, in a situation deprived entirely of the real tools of a knight in battle, a warrior with imaginary armor and a cardboard sword succeeding because of the magic of belief and the nobility of intent being the thing that makes the sword sharp and the armor strong. A magical war sort of destroying a way of life of a person who trains hard and seeks out knowledge that lets them siphon off the power of magic so that it can never hurt them again, and at the same time trying desperately to rebuild everything that was lost. And in the process of doing this, he begins to absorb magic wherever he encounters it, kind of destroying its powers and its ability to affect the world, and using it to fuel his strength. But in doing so, he lives longer for centuries as he taps and lives off of this energy. He's also draining the magic that makes the world the world. And so as he hits a point where the thing he wants to recreate, the world that he wants to bring back that he feels was lost, he can't, and he's getting further and further away from it because he's draining the magic that made that place magical. And so it's just this kind of tortured to desperately struggle in the work to try to achieve something that your existence and struggle is actually preventing from happening. A long ago couple who were going through some kind of argument over a mystical artifact, and something happens that she dies and is reincarnated over and over again in a new form over the centuries, whereas he cannot die. He's immortal. No wound, no illness, no starvation or drowning will kill him. And he just goes through the centuries feeling like the weight of that guilt of what has happened because of their actions long ago, and the loss that he feels, unaware that she's being reborn over and over again. And maybe he's hunting down anything with a hint of the magic that was in the artifact, and he's trying to eliminate all those things as sort of like a way of getting back at the artifact for the damage it did to them. And so he's killed people over and over again, not realizing that in doing so he's killing his mate over and over again, and she's reincarnating in new lives over and over again. And eventually, though, as centuries have passed, there are sparks and knowledge that can be picked up in the pieces of their minds, and it comes to a moment where there's a revelation that instead of fighting each other to defeat each other, she finds, instead of killing him, heal him, and in doing so he will reincarnate and thus break the cycle of being immortal and her dying and being reborn over and over again. They can kind of switch places or trade off being reborn and living long periods of time. I hope you got some inspiration, and I'll see you tomorrow.